Hello everybody, my name's Ty. I'm an alcoholic. By the grace of God, the help of this program, and the help of a sponsor, I had a drink since April 28, 1988. And I'm as grateful as I know how to be for that amount of time in AA. I want to thank the committee for asking me to come up here. I really just needed a convention. For whatever purpose I'm up here, I just really would like to be at a convention. I was spoiled when I was new in AA, and my sponsor took me to conventions all over the place for the first year. I must have gone to 9 or 10 conventions. And when I was about a year sober, I got enrolled in school, and I hadn't been able to make them since. And I just miss it. And I miss going to the conventions and sitting around with all the drunks at the table. And I would go to Beaumont and sit around with all these old men, you know. And I just loved hearing the stories, and there was just a lot of strength that transpired between the two of us when we would sit there and talk, and I just love that, and I miss it. And so I just want to thank y'all for asking me to come up here. And I've already enjoyed myself. I enjoyed the speaker last night, Jimmy. It was a great story, and the comedians, everything. I'm having fun. One of the things I really liked when I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous about going to conventions, any meeting though, when I go to a speaker meeting, what would impress me is going up to getting a seat and sitting down and sitting back and listening to somebody just pour their heart out. And it was a different kind of talk. I've heard a lot of talks in AA, and they're all good talks, and I can get something out of all of them. But there would be these people, and it seems like they would bare their soul to you, and they would touch you deep down inside, and that's the way they would touch me. Guys like Norm Alfie and Johnny Harris and my sponsor would just, anything that had to do with AA, he would cram it down my throat when I was new in Alcoholics Anonymous. And he would cram these tapes down my throat, and I didn't want to do any of this stuff, but I would listen to these guys, and what was so different about them than anybody else ever heard, and a lot of people like them I've heard in Alcoholics Anonymous, is when they would talk about alcoholism, and I needed this when I was new, being young, is I needed somebody that would bypass the episodes that went along with alcoholism, because I didn't have a lot of episodes in my life. I wasn't drinking long enough to lose families and to lose jobs and things like that. I drank for 4 years. And these guys didn't talk a lot about that. What they talked about was down there deep in their gut, man, they were torn into pieces, and I said, yeah, I know that, see. 20 years old, coming to Alcoholics Anonymous, there's not much else I'm going to know except down on the inside, I'm dying, and I need something to help me. And that's what those guys talked about. And one of them was a guy by the name of Henry Formby. And I don't know if you've ever heard his tape before, but one of the things he says in there, I really, really like it. He refers to God as the great soul weaver. And he says that if you give God a chance, you give him all your broken dreams and your broken hopes, and you put them in a basket and you give them to him, then one at a time, he's going to weave those things back into your life. And one at a time, all those things that I sacrificed because of drinking are coming back into my life just a little bit. And Alcoholics Anonymous is great that way. I mean, I love it. And my life has been nothing but miracles since I've been sober. And of course, I haven't liked any of the bad times, and I don't handle bad times very well. I'm a whiner. My sponsor says I'm a whiner. I came up here last night, and I've had some little thing kind of bother me, and Jimmy gave us talk, and under the circumstances, he did a great job, and I respect that. And that's the kind of guys I would look at when I get sober. I said, man, they're carrying mountains on their shoulders. And they do it with such integrity and everything else, and they do it with their eyes looking out towards the world. And I got some little nitpicky thing, and I'm kicking the sidewalk and whining and screaming, and I just go, Ty, get with it. But considering my circumstances, I'm going to need some practice in that area. But nevertheless, I respect those guys. I respect them because that's life. Things happen that you don't always want to happen, and somewhere down the road you got to learn to just carry it and shoulder it. My sponsor told me, and it's a saying I've heard before, is God gives the big crosses to the big hosses and the little crosses to the little hosses, and I just happen to be a little hoss. And I can't carry much more than a little cross right now, so that's all I get. To begin with, and this is not uncommon for an alcoholic to get up here and say, whenever I was real young and kind of felt out of place, I've heard that 100 times, 1,000,000 times, 1,000 times. And when I was young, I really felt out of place. And I don't know what it was. I'd go to school, and I never felt like I really fit in with all the other people there. And I look at this little group over here, this clique, they would call them, and it'd be all the rich kids. And I'd want to be with the rich kids because they were popular, and they got to wear the nice clothes, and their parents would get them cars when they were 15 or whatever. And I never had any of that stuff, and that's what I wanted. So I wanted to hang out with them, so I could be popular, and so I could be cool. Because it seemed like everybody liked them and respect them, and I didn't feel like anybody liked and respected me. The guys that were in that crowd always got all the girls. you see, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to get in there. I wanted the girls to like me, and I wanted the guys to respect me, and it just seemed like it was never going to work. And when I was about 13 or 14, I moved. I was just getting into the clique, and we moved to Baytown, and so I had to make some new friends, and the friends I made, and I don't know why I made them this way, but they were drinking friends. And we'd go out on weekends, and they'd say, Ty, do you want to drink? And at that time in my life, no, I didn't want to drink. And I'll tell you why. I grew up in an alcoholic household, at least from the age of, 14 or so. My stepdad drank, and matter of fact, my stepdad and my mom are in Alcoholics Anonymous today. And we have sobriety in descending order, 876. But we all just came in one after the other. But I lived in that, and I knew that I didn't want to be an alcoholic because I saw the way he acted, and I didn't like that. And so when people would ask me, do you want a drink, I'd say no. And I don't know what it was about this particular day that I was out on a tennis court with a friend of mine. He was a little older. And after getting done, he said, well, how about we stop by over at the Stop and Go and we get a beer? And I don't know why I said yes. They talk about this thing with alcoholic. You tell yourself, no, I don't want to drink, and then there's this little mental obsession that says, yeah, you're going to drink anyway. Well, I hadn't even begun drinking yet, and the little mental obsession said, yeah, you're going to drink anyway. I never drank before in my life. And I said, yeah, and he went in and he got some 6-packs of beer, and I took a few of those things that were Budweiser. I still remember the feeling. And that's unusual, because it just stands out. And it's unlike anything I'd ever felt. I remember when it was going down, and it would tingle on the inside. And I remember just how it made me fuzzy all over. But the one thing, my first statement, the first thing out of my mouth when I turned and looked at him and said, my nose tingles. And there's something else, though, that I couldn't really tell him about that particular drink. I could tell him how it made me feel. My face would tingle and everything else. I could tell him that. But what was hard to express was, as you know, I really felt all right. I just really felt like this guy liked me because of who it was. It didn't have to be anything different. And everything seemed to fall into place. The world was on its axis. Everything was just going right. And I don't know what it was about that alcohol, but something made the difference right then. I should have known I was in trouble. I went home after playing that tennis game, and my boss called me into work. I wasn't supposed to go in that day. And I went ahead and went to work. I was drunk. And the feeling I got when I walked in, I worked at the theater. It's not like I was really going to do anything at my job to hurt anybody. All I did was sit at the door and pull tickets, and that was it. There wasn't much to it. I couldn't mess it up very badly. But when I walked in, I could just tell that people saw me differently. The girls behind the counter, I could tell they just thought I was a cute devil. And the guys, I could tell that they really respected me. See, I just could tell that, and what it was that drinking. And so from that time on, I knew where I was going to be putting myself every weekend. If I wanted the girls to look at me like that, and if I wanted the guys to kind of have a little respect for me, I need to be somewhere where I get some of that boost, because that's the trick right there. That's the magic. It's the alcohol. Nothing else ever worked, but alcohol did. So from that point on, my first drink, alcohol started to control my life. I started deciding where I was going to be on the weekends based upon where the alcohol was going to be. And this was very difficult when I first got sober, to try to reconcile a lot of these things about being 20 years old and coming into AA after drinking only 4 years. I'd come into the West Baytown group in Baytown, and you got these old people down there, 35 or so, and I was like, I'm just not going to fit in with these people, you know, and I had to stay sober for about a year before I realized that a lot of those things that had happened to some of those people actually happened to me, but they happened in disguise. All right? Consider something. I'd hear these people and they say, you know, I drank about 2 fists a day. And what's the thing, though, when you're old enough to drink and go buy your bottle and you go back to your house and you drink 2 fists, what do you got when you wake up the next morning? You got 2 empty bottles. If you're 20 years old or you're 16 years old and you go out and you get drink, what do you got left over the next morning if you never bought your own booze? See, I never had any bottles left over to use as a reference. What I would do is I would go to the parties where they had the kegs. Or I'd go to the parties where they had the little, what do they call it, jungle juice, and they have the garbage cans full. All I had to show for it was an empty garbage can. See, but I never had any reference, so I didn't say I drank 1 fifth a day or 2 fifths a day. I just sat by the can and drank all night, and that's all I did. And so it took me a long time to realize, you know, you might have been drinking like that all along. And see, but that takes a little time, because in the first year or so, I was in denial anyway, because I didn't want to admit that I had the same problems everybody else in here had. Anyway, alcohol started controlling my life right off the bat, and it worked for me. It did exactly what I wanted it to do for me. When I would drink, I would fit right in, and I could be the guy that I always wanted to be. I was cool, and I was slick, and I was handsome, and I had the right clothes on and everything. Regardless of what I had on, I had the right clothes on. And it was just wonderful. And I liked it. But it didn't take very long before the alcohol started to catch up to me, and in particular, when I got out of high school is when things kind of got to going down track fast. All my friends, when I got out of high school, a lot of them would go off to college, and some of them would go enlist in the military, and some would get jobs, and some would get married. Well, I didn't do any of those things. What I did the night after that night, graduation night, I went to the beach and I got drunk, and I did that for the next 6 months. And the only reason I stopped doing that for a period of time was because my health was going bad, and I could see that my health was going bad from drinking. I'd say, well, let me just stop a little bit and kind of get a job and straighten up, and everything will be okay. And I'd straighten up, and I'd get a job, and I'd hold the job for about a month. And friends would come along and say, let's go out and party. And I'd go out and party, and we'd have a drinking, and that was it. I wasn't working anymore. Drinking and working, they just don't go to hand with me. I'd do one or the other. And so I'd quit that job or get fired from that job or lose that job somewhere or another, and I would just drink. And I'd drink for 3, 4, 5 months or what have you. In one of these periods of time, I found something very unusual about alcohol. You know, it was something that just made me fit in, granted, when I would drink it. But there was something else about it. I used to go out to this place called Upper Crust Pizza in Baytown. On a Friday night after the football game, everybody used to go up there, and we'd sit at Upper Crust Pizza, and we'd drink beer and eat pizza and just be cool and crazy and what have you. And one night I went up there and I had a 6-pack of beer, and me and some friends were hanging out, and all these jocks were over there, and all the band people, they called us BQs. You know what BQs are, right? The band queers? That's what they called us. Just because you're in band, I don't know why I got the name, but that's what they called us. And so they had the jocks on this side and the band people on this other side. And for some reason, some guy was going to come up to us. You know, look at me. I'm 26 now, and I was 8 years younger then, a little bitty guy. And this guy comes up, and he's a big football player, and he's going to pick on me because I used to have real, real long hair. And he started ragging me about, are you a girl, and so that. And it's like, what did I do? You know, the story of my life, what did I do? And the guy's picking on me. And when I get drunk, I get a little mouthy, and I'm not really much of a fighter. I got into one fight in my life, and after that girl beat me up, I never did it again. And so I don't do that very much. So the guy was mouthing off, and oh, hell. He was mouthing off, and I was mouthing off, and the cops came up, and fortunately, for me anyway, they broke it up. And I got my green Volare and drove off and went down to a friend's house, and I was mad and said, I was just talking to myself, boy, he's just lucky I didn't get at him, you know. And but you know what I was really mad about? Down here, I was mad because I was running. I was mad because I never could stand up to anybody when something like that would happen. I was mad because I always felt like a coward. Yeah, I didn't like that. I didn't like the knowledge. I didn't like the fact that I felt like I always had to run. Like I could never stand there and just say, look, you don't have the right to pick on me. It just bothered the hell out of me. And so I went down to this friend's house, and I walked up the stairs. They was a 2-story house, and there wasn't anybody home. Here, there was a friend home, but not a person friend. I walked in, and there was a bottle of Everclear sitting on the bar. And I said, yeah, that'll do the trick right there. And I grabbed the Everclear and sat down on the thing, and I poured some in the cap. You don't get the cap deal. I was a cap drinker. I didn't drink them out of little shot glasses. I drank it out of the cap. And I think I had 2 caps full or something like that, 3 caps full, and I was just angry and I don't know what, but I blacked out, my first blackout. But something that I learned from that particular experience when I took that drink, and I don't know how much of that Everclear I drank, and was that when I wanted to, I could drink alcohol to reach oblivion. You know, I didn't know what that word meant when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. They would say that we get to this point of oblivion, right? And I didn't know what it meant, so I went and looked it up. And if I can remember correctly, it's something to the effect of forgetfulness, a state of forgetfulness, an extreme state of forgetfulness. And that night when I drank that Everclear, you know what? I forgot. I forgot that I had a reason to be mad at that guy. I forgot that I had a reason to feel bad about who I was. I forgot everything about me that I disliked. And that was oblivion, and I loved it. Because for that moment right there, I didn't have to sit and say, oh, you bum. Say, you coward. I didn't have to do that. I could just drink that alcohol down the chute. It works and does the job. It's oblivion. Alcohol is more than just something that helps you fit in. If you just want to get out, it'll do that too. And that's the trick it did for me. I continued drinking and continued getting in trouble. And there was a lot of things that I wanted to do with my life that I never thought I really could do. One thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to be a fighter pilot in the Navy. And in one of these little stinches when I sobered up and said, okay, I'm going to go enlist in the Navy, I did go enlist in the Navy. I went in under probationary purposes because I'd done LSD, and you're not supposed to be able to really get in except under certain conditions. And so they said, look, you just don't do any more drugs, we'll put you on probation and you can come and enlist. And I did that. And they said, well, my mistake. The night before I was supposed to ship out, I smoked a joint because somebody said it was a good idea. And I went up the next day, and it's not so bad that I smoked a joint. Well, it's bad, but I think probably more than people than just I do that the night before they ship out. But I think I was the only idiot to say that I did it the night before I shipped out. And, you know, it sounds idiotic, and it is idiotic unless you realize the motives, I think, today. And that was I really didn't want to go. I wanted to be able to say, you know, I'm trying to do something with my life, but hell, everything's just working against me. See, I just wanted an excuse. You see, it makes more sense to me today now that I'm sober a little bit to look back at that and say, yeah, not an idiot, you were just playing the game. And I played the game for a long time like that. When I got out of that deal, I drank a little longer, and every time I'd go out and drink, it seems that I would run into some more things, drugs, all kinds of drugs. I would run into pot first, and then eventually ecstasy and LSD and cocaine. And I did everything, but I'm basically an alcoholic, and I just drank to the point that I lost all inhibitions that would have kept me from drinking, see, or using drugs. And that's why I ended up there. Some people drink enough to where they become thieves and murderers. I drank enough to where I said, I'm going to do every drug available. Anything that makes me feel different. And that gets to be an expensive habit. I tried going to school when there was little things when I cleaned up just a little bit, and I lasted 3 weeks. And the reason I lasted 3 weeks is after I got this expensive drug habit along with my drinking, I said, well, I need to do something to make some cash. I was waiting tables and it wasn't enough because I was really getting to the point where I had to go out and I just had to have all kinds of money on me because I just would do the stuff and I would do it, whatever it was, drinking, pot, pills. I just continued doing it. And I needed something to make money fast. And I saw Scarface. And I said, you know, a gangster could cover the overhead. And I said, you know, I might do good as a gangster. Now, I got a baby face now. 8 years ago, actually 9 or 10 years ago when I first started doing this, let's say that I wasn't a very good gangster. But I sure loved playing the game. I sure loved going out there and being able to wear some of those nice clothes and carry a little money in my pocket, even though it wasn't mine and they weren't my clothes. I loved doing that. I ended up with some young people that were living down in Houston, and they all had this one little apartment. I've met some people here this weekend who are familiar with this, and I was afraid, not afraid, but I knew I would. Some people from the old past, and it's kind of neat because some of them are sober. But I got in with this little group of people that we were all about the same age, and we were all just getting started. It hadn't really, you couldn't see the wear yet. See, we're all reasonably healthy. We still got some of our faculties and everything. We're not going crazy yet. We're just having fun. And I came home one day and told my parents that I was going to school in Houston. I lied, right? And moved in with these people. And for about 6 months, I had the greatest time in the world. And the reason I had a great time was because I was free, I thought. I was independent. I didn't have to tell my parents where I was going. I didn't have to tell them when I was going to be in. I didn't have any rules, I didn't think. I could do what I wanted to do, when I wanted to do it, and didn't have to answer to people. Now, you know that's a lie. That's really a lie. I was talking to a young guy, he was about 16, who was getting sober. He was in a treatment center in Baytown, and I was saying, how you like living at home? He says, well, it's all right except for all the rules. And I said, there's no rules when you're drinking? He says, no, when I'm out there I can do what I can do. And I thought about that, and you know, the truth is that the rules out there, the way they apply is if you screw the wrong person off, they can do whatever they want to you. And I know that from experience. Piss the wrong person off, and the rule is they're going to rebuke. And it happens enough times out there, and some people just don't get out of that kind of thing alive. And the thing I found out about drinking and that lifestyle is there's a lot of things that go hand in hand with it, besides just the torture of drinking. You can run into the wrong people. And if you're a person like me, who's just out there to play the game, and thinks that lifestyle is just like the cops and robbers, and it's all just fun and games, well, it's not just fun and games. Some people are very serious about what they're doing out there. I wasn't really one of them, see. I was out there seeking something. And today I know what I was looking for, I think, was peace of mind. But I thought that I was looking for money, and I thought that I was looking for girls, and I thought that I was looking for prestige and a little respect. You know, I really thought I wanted respect. And it wasn't that even. I think I wanted you to fear me because I was afraid of you. I think when I looked at those guys, the big tough guys when I was in school, since I was a little scrawny guy, that, you know, the one thing I really need is for one of those guys to look at me and go, ooh, and shake, you know. That's what I really wanted. And so to that end, when I was a gangster, I would have a little briefcase, and in the briefcase I had my little gun with no bullets. So that a big gangster couldn't take it away from me and shoot me with it if it did have bullets. But it was just to flash around and to be cool and what have you. But I really wanted you to fear me. I really wanted you to fear me. I don't want you to fear me anymore. I don't know what I wanted then, but I was just scared. I was a scared kid. It's a funny life out there. I got into a lot of trouble, and as I said, some of the trouble you get into out there is not just with drinking, it's with the people you run into, and I stepped on the wrong toe one day, and that's where I learned about the rules. And I found myself in this town in Austin. I was in Austin one evening, and I found myself running for my life. Because as I said, I had made the wrong person mad, and they put a contract out on me. And I was scared, and I didn't know what was happening. I was staying over at these friends' houses this evening. I thought they were friends. I didn't realize the whole thing was set up in the first place. But I thought they were friends, and they said, let's go somewhere. And so I hopped in the car, and along the way, things started adding up, and I was driving, so I said, I have the option of stopping and getting out. So I stopped, got out, and started running. And here come these guys, and there was 3 of them. And that was the scariest night of my life. You know, there's a lot of things that are scary about when you're drinking. I had a seizure, I think, just a week before that, an alcohol and drug-related seizure. And it's weird, and I'll tell you this little thing for whatever it's worth. I was doing some cocaine and some inhalants and some pills and some drinking and smoking some pot. And the next thing I know is I was coming up off the floor. And I had been in a situation like that enough to know when people come off the floor and they don't know what they'd just done, they had just been in a seizure. And to tell you how preoccupied I was with trying to be cool and everything, I said, well, I didn't look uncool, did I? Because, see, I was really overly concerned with my image and how people saw me, and I just knew that when you're having seizures, you're just not cool looking. Very uncool looking when you're having seizures. And so, but I became terrified shortly after that. And I was so scared that the alcohol and drugs were going to kill me. I said, hand me a beer. And that should make sense to some of you. Maybe it does. But I was so scared that I was going to die that night from a drug and alcohol-related overdose that I needed a drink to calm the nerves. Bad. Real bad. And it makes sense to me today. It didn't even dawn on me what was happening then. And it was a miracle that I survived. But the next week found me out in the street running for my life. And there's something about thinking you're going to die. There's nothing anticipating it. You know it's coming. It's only a few blocks behind you, and you're anticipating it, and you know it's going to happen any second. A lot of things are going to go through your head at this moment. Have you ever asked yourself, what do you think God's going to think when you're done? See? Have you ever, I'll tell you what I thought anyway. I won't ask you what you thought, but what I thought was I grew up in a Baptist home, heaven, hell, everything else, and I said, oh, God. You know, the last 9 months I've been nothing but being, bad boy. A real bad boy. And I was fairly sure of where I was going, and I was terrified. I mean, I was scared. But I was even more scared of running. Because I've been running at that time for a little while, and it gets awful old running and hiding out and everything else, and living secluded and isolated by yourself and not seeing any. That gets crazy. You go start, and nothing to drink at times, you can go crazy. And I was tired of running. And that night I said, I'm not running anymore. I'm going to stop right here. And I said, God, if they're supposed to get me, let them get me, because I'm not running anymore. And every alcoholic gets to the point in their life, I think they just want to commit suicide. Some of them do it with a gun to their head. Some of them do it by parking the car in the garage and leaving it running. And I do it by saying, look, if you want them to kill me, kill me. See? And it's a point in my life where I think I just gave up on living. And I thought about, when I was sitting there in those brief moments, I was thinking about, that's pretty bad. It's like I had a really good childhood after all. I'm not one of those guys who can say that my childhood was just piss poor. I can't really say that. A lot of people might be able to look and say, well, it was just terrible. But I had a good mother, and I had good grandparents, and I had a good brother, good relatives, and we had fun together, and my family it was a good family. We had our problems. I had my problems early on, but there was nothing to look back at my childhood and say, look, I need to blame it on them because they treated me poorly. That's not true. Everything that happened in my life happened because in some way I manipulated it and set it in motion somehow. I was there because of me, nobody else. And I said, that's terrible. because I really did have a lot of fun back then. And I thought about some things, that's called your life flashing in front of your eyes. Well, there's a little part, I think, too, that might happen. I don't know if it's happening to y'all. Have you ever thought about what your life might have been had you just taken a different path? And I thought, what could I have done with my life? And I pictured this guy who was actually a responsible member of society. It's a funny thing, a responsible member of society. I pictured a guy who actually had a little discipline or a heart, and when he set out to do something, he could do it. Now, that was a funny thing, too, because it wasn't me. I pictured a guy that was walking on the beach with his family, he's a decent dad and everything else, and that's something I want to do today. But I said, that could have been true, and look at here, I'm just going to die out here in the streets. They're going to do the Austin Post the next day, and the back pages, bones dug up in some valley, and they're going to be mine, and that scared me. It scared me to know that I was going to be nothing else than an unknown obituary. That was it, an unknown obituary, see? And that's what I'm going to have to show for my life. I got, right then, I really, from somewhere, found the strength to go on, because I didn't want to miss that. Whatever it was that I glimpsed just that moment, I didn't want to let go without trying it. Just a little bit. And so, I was running barefoot. I had, on my run there, I felt like I'd been weighted down. It was winter, so I had a big coat on and some baggy clothes and big floppy shoes and everything else. And I felt that in order to speed me up, I needed to shed clothes. So I was half naked by the time I'd gotten to the place, trying to run faster. I'd been running barefooted and it tore my feet up, but I ran and I ran and I ran until I got to a friend's house. And the next day, found me back on a bus towards Houston, thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I ended up down here at the bar. And I was sitting in the bar drinking some double Bloody Marys. It's the only time in my life I ever went to a bar and they actually served me, and it was one of my last drinks. And I sat in that bar thinking, how am I going to get those guys in Austin anyway? Let them know they can't mess with me. See, that's what I was concerned with, is trying to get that respect, not the fear, to be honest a little bit, trying to get them to fear me and try to get even. If you're going to hurt me, I'm going to hurt you back, see. And I, for some reason, decided I was going to leave that bar, and I went to this other one just a little ways across town and walked in, and lo and behold, across the room was the guy that had put the contract out on me. And I said, oh, well, interesting. I had some options then. I could have turned around and walked off, or I could have gone up, which I did, and say, look, I'm tired of running, and here I am. And he said, well, look, I don't really necessarily want to kill you. I just want you out of the way, because you stir things up, and you just make it messy. And I knew I made it messy. I was good at making it messy. And he said, look, I'm going to arrange things so if you just get off the street, we'll take care of you. I'll get you off the street, you can go home and just get you out of my hair. And I said, well, wait a minute now. I don't know that I want to go home because I still hadn't made all my millions. And I hadn't met the right girl or anything like that. I haven't got all this stuff I went out there in the first place for. See? And he says, well, he asked me exactly, what do you have? And I thought about it for a second. All my clothes were in a bag around behind the bar. And I had just a little bit in my pocket of money, change, is it. And honestly, I didn't have anything. I don't know why I was staying out there, except just to continue to drink, to continue to run, and live in this fantasy that around the next corner, over the next bend, in the next valley, there's going to be an answer. See? I just kept chasing that. What was it Norm called? It was a synthetic existence, a fantasy land, and I loved it for a little while. I don't mean to say that I didn't have fun when I was drinking, because I had a lot of fun early on. But these times in my life were no longer fun. It was no longer fun hiding out, and it was no longer fun running, and it was no longer fun just being alone, and it was no longer fun just dying on the inside. That gets painful. And I got to the point where when I would drink, I no longer got that feeling on the inside like I was just equal with you. I just I was physically drunk, but my mind was wide awake. And knew every right thing I'd done, and every problem I ever had living with, it was still there. Drinking wouldn't take it away. See? And it was terrible. And so I told my friend, I said, yeah, you go ahead and arrange it. And he did. He came by and picked me up the next day, and he took me home. And I call that a miracle because, and the way I look at this is, he said, the guy that was going to kill me was the guy that took me to Alcoholics Anonymous and saved my life. And if you don't think God had something to do with it, see? Because it just doesn't work like that. If I would try to set it up, it wasn't going to work like that. And I know today when I had asked him sometime after that, because he continued to go to Alcoholics Anonymous for a little bit, he says, the reason I brought you home is because I knew you'd be more miserable at home without a car than you would be out there drinking. And he was wrong, See, I can get a car, and I can live without a car, but I wasn't going to live very much longer drinking unless it was just to live to be miserable. And so he gave me something, he gave me a blessing. And I hope one day that I might see him in here. Anyway, I came home and I walked in my house. I hadn't seen my parents for 9 months, and you know what they talked about, right? Rules. There's going to be some rules. If you're going to come home, you've got some things you have to do, like make Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and I didn't want to hear anything about Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. I didn't want anybody bugging me about my drinking. I knew that it was a problem, but I didn't want to hear about all that stuff, and I didn't want the regiment, and I didn't want the routine, and I didn't want to be on my case about getting a job and being responsible. I didn't want any of that. But who am I to say I want this and want that anymore? All right, I didn't have anything coming off the street. It shows you how ungrateful and closed-minded and preoccupied I am with myself, at least when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, still sometimes today. I said, all right, I can just go to Alcoholics Anonymous for however long it takes to get straight, and we'll be fine. This is not drinking things, no big deal. All right, I can go, I can do it. I went to my first meeting, I looked at the 12 steps, that's just true and false, right? Easy. I think you got a 50% chance of staying sober, right? And I was drunk in a week. And what was odd about it was I had gotten a desire chip with the intention to stay sober, just to stop drinking. Because I thought that that's how easy it was, that you just stop drinking. I'd never tried to quit when I was out there, and I think that's the reason I didn't know what I was up against. But I had to drink a few times, and I did. I came in on March 20th of 1988, and there's about a month there where I was still drinking just a little bit. And I was answering some questions for myself. Because when I come into Alcoholics Anonymous, y'all are talking about being alcoholic, and I never questioned my behavior or ever associated my behavior with alcoholism. And so a lot of people in here, they drink for 20, 30 years, and what happens, it seems like, and this is something my sponsor told me, I stay sober longer, and maybe I'll have an answer for you or what. But I don't know. This is something he told me. He says, when you stay out there and you drink 20, 30 years, you get a lot of questions. See? You ask yourself a lot of questions. Why do I do this? You say, you drink for 4 years, you haven't even drunk long enough to ask yourself the questions yet. Sometimes you just drink and long enough to hurt. You hurt, but you haven't started asking yourself the questions. And I hadn't. And it wasn't until I came into Alcoholics Anonymous that I started asking myself the question, do I really have a problem with alcohol? Can I really not control it? And so every time when I'd go out there and drink in that first 30 days, I'd ask myself the question, am I an alcoholic? And I said, I'll just try not to drink. And one night I went out with this friend of mine who had got me in, and he said, I'm going to go in and get some wine coolers, and you want one? I said, no, thank you. And he brought them back out, and he says, you sure you don't want one? I said, no, I don't want one. And I picked one up, and I drank it. And that answered one question. It's called the mental obsession. Alcoholism, mental obsession, physical compulsion. And I needed to answer that. I said, well, that's the mental obsession thing. Maybe I just got that part and not the physical compulsion. If I ain't got that, then I got 50% more drinking to do. And so we continued to drink a little bit, and we went out to this place. There was this club called Excess, and we were still going there. And I was only 20 years old. I wasn't old enough to go in and get a band and drink. So if I was going to do any drinking, it had to be before I went in. And I had 2 or 3 wine coolers before I went in. And we went with this friend of mine. He goes in. He's older than I am, so he orders 7 kamikazes, and I thought he was being a gentleman and ordering me a few. And he, selfish son of a gun, got them all for himself. But this set me up for a second question. It's called the physical compulsion. See, I had those 3 drinks in me, and when he was sitting there drinking, something down here was churning, and I needed to drink bad, and I was getting irritable. And so I was putting some pieces together there, and I needed those. Because about 2 weeks later, I was going to be at home, and I was going to be going crazy. Because I was beginning to know that I was an alcoholic. I was suspecting that I was an alcoholic. And I was going crazy, and I was pacing the floor, and my parents were there, and they said, can we call your sponsor? I said, no, don't call that grouchy old man. I haven't told you about him. He said, grouchy old man. I said, don't call him, don't do anything. I'll work through it by myself. And so I was pacing the floor and everything, and I was torn. It was this thing where they said you get to where you can't imagine life with a drink or without a drink. And so bad I wanted to run down to this Chevron station and wahoo some beer. And so bad I wanted to stay right there and hang on just to see if I could make it to the end of the night. And I didn't know what I was going to end up doing. But there was 2 people inside me, and they were going in different directions, and it was painful. And my stepdad said, well, sit down and let me read you Bill's story. I don't want to hear Bill's story, right? He wants to read me Bill's story, and I did not want to hear it. And see, he's the kind of guy, he'll just get in there and he'll just start reading the book, and he'll read all 160, he'll read the whole book if you don't say, please, please just, he's going to sit down there and he's going to read the whole dadgum book to me until I just got sober. And in a way he helped me, because I think by him sitting there long enough, he kept me there long enough for the pain to become so intense that something made sense to me about the first step of Alcoholics Anonymous. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. And when I first looked at that step and I said, my life is unmanageable, it's because, and this is in March 20th of 1988, my life is unmanageable because I haven't got a girl, because I haven't got any money, because I don't got a car, and I don't got the job I want that pays me what I want. My life is definitely unmanageable. See? And you know that can happen to good people. See? People that are actually trying to pay the price out there to do something with their lives, that happens to them too. But see, that was my unmanageability, because I wasn't getting what I wanted. April 27th, 1988, I'm sitting in my room, and my life is unmanageable because the life that I know today, what I know and define as life today, is what goes on in here. This is life. It's the only life I've ever known. See? And this was unmanageable. Down in the gut, in my heart, in my head, in my soul, everything was going in different directions. I knew what it meant that night for life to be unmanageable, because I couldn't manage it any longer in here. Head that night, I said, God, anything you want, anything at all, I'm going to do it, but I don't want to be the same sorry son of a gun sitting here tonight hurting the way I'm hurting, because I am the person I am. I don't want to be that way anymore. See? And when I lifted my head for my prayer, I knew, because the thought was in my mind, that everything was going to be okay. See? You know what the key word in that is? Going to be. Going to be. It's not everything's okay. I was still an alcoholic. I still had the same old behavior. I still had the same old thinking and everything else. The only thing I had extra is the knowledge that if I stick in there, things are going to be okay. And it was shortly after before I really got involved with my sponsor, and you have to really, he's a great guy and I love him to death, but he's a grouchy old man. He's a little short, about 5 foot tall. And when I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous and I saw this guy, and he said, come here, boy. First thing he said was, come here, boy, give me some coffee. And the next thing he said was, we're going to talk about you. And he started talking about me, and he really irritated me. The way he would talk about the kind of person I was, because he knew me inside and out, see. And I just wanted to tell him, you know who you're talking to? See, and he made this remark, and he didn't know what I was thinking, but right after that he says, you never know who you're standing next to in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. And I found that to be true. All kinds of people come to AA. The real gangsters come to AA sometimes. See, not just the little boy gangsters that are playing gangster, but the real gangsters come to AA. The little boy gangsters like me are the ones that come and mouth off about being gangsters. But he told me that, and I kind of felt it would be wise to just kind of listen to the old man and get us a cup of coffee and get a resentment, and I'll put it on the fourth step a year later. And that old man took me in, and he says, look, we're going to do something about the way life's going for you. I'm your sponsor, all right? I didn't ask him to be my sponsor. He appointed himself my sponsor. As a matter of fact, what he really did was he says, look, I want to be your temporary sponsor until you find someone. As soon as you left, I went and grabbed this guy, be my sponsor, please. I didn't want that guy any longer than I had to have him, but I couldn't get rid of him that easily. And he would make me do silly things. He didn't take me through the steps and say, okay, we're going to go and get into the esoteric meanings of the steps. He said, come over to my house, we're going to work. We're going to rebuild an engine. We're going to paint a fence. I said, that's not in the steps. See? And that's exactly what he had me do, though. He didn't get into the book with me right off. And today, it's because I don't know that I might have been ready for the book or that I could understand anything I would have read in the book. See, I have no idea. I didn't even know what Alcoholics Anonymous had to offer. It was for me. I didn't know it yet or not. But instead, he would have me come over to his house, and we would just work and what have you. And it's very interesting the way this whole thing came about, because I was watching a movie, and I like to tell this story because it just seems to clear it up all real well. Have you ever seen The Karate Kid? That is my relationship with my sponsor. And I'll tell you how it works. His old Daniel-san comes in, and he's been beat up, right? The world, these guys have gotten him, and that's me, because the world had just been beating me up. I was black and blue. And this old man pulls him off the side and said, come on, I'm going to teach you karate. And I said, okay, great, this was my sponsor. I'm going to teach you something about sobriety. He said, paint the fence. And I said, well, okay. And I would paint the fence just like Daniel-san. Old Mr. Miyagi would get him and say, let's paint the fence. He said, well, I paint 3,000 yards of fence today. And the next day he comes out, he said, we'll do karate lessons tomorrow. So Daniel San shows up there, and Mr. Miyagi says, let's wax some cars today. You know, wax some cars. And so he gets these things on, he's waxing on, he's waxing off. And next day comes along, and he says, well, we'll do some karate lessons today. He says, we're going to sand some floors. And he gets out there and he's sanding floors. And this is me and my sponsor. One day it's, come on, we're going to go paint the fence. Come on, we're going to help somebody move. Come on, you got to turn this wrench. Do it like this, right? When I do this stuff on his engine. And just, it's a great parallel. And then one day Daniel-san is out there and he gets tired of all this stuff. He says, this guy I'm working, I'm a slave, all right? I'm painting the fences, I'm sanding the floors, I'm waxing the cars, I'm doing everything, but I'm not learning any karate. And he says, storms off one day and says, to heck with old Mr. Miyagi, he didn't know what he's doing. And he goes and tells him, Mr. Miyagi says, well, before you leave, I just want you to do something for me real quick. And he says, sand the floor. And he sands the floor while Mr. Miyagi throws a punch and he blocks it. He says, now, I want you to paint the fence. And Daniel-san makes the motion of painting the fence, and Mr. Miyagi throws a punch and he blocks it. And it begins to dawn on Daniel-san that he wasn't just painting fences and sanding floors. See, what he was doing was he was learning something. Well, it began to dawn on me now that this old man, I wasn't out there just painting fences and helping people move or anything like that. What I was doing was just called living, sober. I hadn't had a drink in all that time. See? I hadn't had a drink in all that time. I was preoccupied doing something to help somebody if it was out moving that day, or doing something to help him that day if it was just painting a fence. Alcoholics Anonymous. See? Alcoholics Anonymous, out doing something for somebody. And I didn't know it. I didn't know that I was being prepared to get out there and handle things that were going to come up in the world. That I was building discipline. My sponsor was crazy. Well, he wasn't crazy, but he was crazy. He would, one of his little things that he would do on me every once in a while is he would say, okay, I want you to be at my house at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I always had to be there on time. He was very punctual. He wanted me there on time for discipline's sake. He wanted to discipline me. He was strict and so I get there one day, I got there at 7 o'clock in the morning. He says, okay, you can go home. I just wanted to see your show. He was tough. He was tough. So, what was I learning? What's it all good for, right? What's it all good for? Well, I'll tell you. My first few days when I wasn't over at my sponsor's house working, I was sitting at home watching TV, eating popcorn, saying I love sobriety. Until somebody called me up and said, look, we got a job out here and we'd like you to come out and work for us. Well, I hadn't called them and I wondered who did. See, because I was enjoying myself at home on that couch. But I had said, April 27th, I had said anything, right? Anything. You asked me to do it, I'm going to do it. And part of the things at the house was get a job when a job's available. And so I went out there and I went to work. And all that stuff I've been doing with the sponsors started to pay off because I went out there and I would show up on time. And I would do my job while I was there. And I'd get out of myself and try to do the best I could. See? When I was off, it may be 8 o'clock when I get off because of the hours in the job, I'd head straight to a meeting. And I worked in the steel place. We'd load 18-wheelers with these big beams of steel. And when steel is covered with a film of oil, and you just get black and greasy and everything else. And I'd hated going to meetings. I was all just filthy and sweaty and stinky and everything else. And I'd go and sit in the back of the room. And like I said, I was very preoccupied with image, and this was great for me. This was great for me because I was very egotistical and needed to get over it. And not over it, but needed to work on it anyway. And so I go in there. 8 o'clock, I go to a meeting. I might only make half of it, but I'm going to make a meeting. If I had to work till 9 o'clock, I might go up there and have a cup of coffee afterwards. I would, that job, I'd work it, make my meetings. That's what I did. See, exactly what my sponsor had tried to teach me to do. Be responsible, number one. Be able to support yourself. And then as time came along, we did get into things that had to do with the steps. My sponsor gave me, it's a 7-step list, and it's not to replace the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's just things that I do on a daily basis, such as reading the big book, doing prayers morning and night, meditation, daily meditation, calling the sponsor daily, things like that. And he said, do these things every day. And so every day I would do those things the best that I could. And in the beginning, I couldn't do them all. I may have been able to do them all, but I wasn't willing to do them all. The one thing I did do was I would pray in the morning and I would pray in the evening. And I had a hard time with everything else in between except for making a meeting. And the old man knew I was having problems with this, so he'd say, well, come over to my house at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I'd come over to his house at 7 o'clock in the morning and said, here's the meditation book. He said, if you can't do it at home, you can do it here. See? And so I'd do my meditation book. When I was about a year sober, I ended up getting a job working with my sponsor, and this was hell, because I had to put up with him 20 hours a week already, not to mention now 40 more hours a week. And I'd go, and we'd work side by side there every week for probably about 6 months. And then after work, we'd go and hang out, go to a meeting, and go home, get some dinner, and clean up. And I did this probably 20 hours a week. And so I spent a lot of time with that sponsor the first year and a year and a half. But it was exactly what I needed, all right? Because I had no idea what I was doing, and I was just lost. And I needed somebody to take me by the hand. Not everybody needs this, all right? And it's not necessarily good for everybody. But I needed somebody to take me by the hand and says, this is how you go take your bath, you brush your teeth, get up in the morning, you go to work. I needed somebody to point everything out and say, this is the way you just live like a normal life. Because I've never done it. I don't know. I may have somewhere back then. But I'd gotten out of the practice of taking care of myself. And so I had to get into those little things, and the little sponsor just helped me do that. At this job we were on, one of the practices there was to get these 500-pound barrels, and we'd stick them in a slab, and we'd cut them into 40-pound slabs. There was a machine, and we'd cut them into 40-pound slabs. And we'd stack these things every day. And when I first started there, I had a real problem with this because I wanted to quit. I didn't like the labor. And I walked in one day, and the old sponsor saw that it was wearing on my face because I just had never done that. And I was wanting to give up. And he could see it in my eyes. He says, look, he said, don't give up. All right, don't let that job beat you. You just stick in there, and you can do it. And if it wasn't for the fact that I just bought a car and had to make payments, I would have walked. And if it wasn't for the fact that I didn't want him to think I was a wimp, I would have walked. But I wanted him to look at me and know that I could stick with it. See, I wanted him to know that. And that paid off. Because just a short time after that, I enrolled in school, and I was going to do something I'd never done before. I was a terrible student in high school. I was a C and D student, basically, in high school. And the reason I didn't try. But beyond that, the reason I think I didn't try is because when I would go to school, there was something different about you people and me. See, I'd look across the room, and there'd be a guy over there with his nose in a book, and I said, you know, that guy's smart. And I'd look at me and say, I'm not very smart. Well, that guy makes A's, and I make C's. It's got to be genetic. See? It's something he's born with, I know. And there was this group of people in school that were just like that. They seemed to do real well. They would get the A's and the B's, and they got all the things from the colleges and universities saying, we want you. And I didn't get that stuff. And so I thought there was something different about me, that I just couldn't do that. So when I went back to school, I wasn't expecting very much. I was going to take some remedial courses and try to get some trade and just do the best I could and squeeze out with a C or D or a C or B or whatever, best I could. And my first semester, I'll just do what Alcoholics Anonymous taught me to do. I'll go in there. I'll take the time out to study. I'll make the sacrifices necessary. If I have to sacrifice my social life, I'll do it. Whatever I got to do, I'm going to go in there and do the best I can. That's what Alcoholics Anonymous taught me to do. Work for it. Don't ask life to give you something on a silver platter because it doesn't come that way. You work for it. And so I was going to work for it. And I got an A the first year. Now, the only thing is I'm a doubting Thomas. It was a remedial math course. It was a remedial writing course. I said, well, you know, you can get an A in remedial writing and math. And but this next year, you watch, my true colors will show then. And so I went and took a little grade a little higher. I had to take some like freshman English and intermediate algebra, and said, it's going to show now. And I go in, I said, but I'm going to apply the same principles. And it doesn't hurt to try. And I got an A. Actually, I got a B in English and an A in math. And I said, well, it's a mistake, and it's going to catch up with me sooner or later. Well, a year ago I took Cal 1. 2 years ago I took Cal 1. I said, yeah, it's going to show here. We're getting up into some of that college math now, see? I said, yeah, it'll show. And I went to this Cal, and I was terrified. Just because, you know why I was terrified? It's because all smart people in school used to take that class. And I wasn't like them. That's why it scared me. Because I was one of the guys that never got and did that stuff. I said, I'll go in here and just do the best I can. And I opened the book, and one of the first weeks I was doing the problems, and there was one particular problem that scared the hell out of me. It said something to the effect that if you have an ice cube by these dimensions and the air temperature was this and it was melting at this rate, how long before nothing's left? I said, oh my God, you know? And I said, there's no way I can solve that thing. And so I started flipping through the pages. I said, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And I got to this one page, and it says, here are the steps you take to solve this kind of problem. I know all about steps. See? And I start with step 1, and step 2, and step 3, and so on down to the end of the list until the problem's solved. And I got an A in that course. Surprised the hell out of me. See? I'm beginning to think I might be able to do that it has something to do with work. I'm starting to think that. It has something to do with work and sacrifice. You know, maybe that's what it was when I was sitting in that room when I was in elementary and high school and junior high. When I was sitting in that room and I was judging all those kids, I say, yeah, you're the lucky guys because you just got all the gifts and everything like that. Maybe I didn't go over there and see them that night studying. when I was out playing till the lights went down? Maybe I didn't ever go and consider that. I bet you I didn't. I bet you I didn't really consider the fact that while I was at home playing, they were up burning the midnight oil. See? Yeah, I'm starting to think that a lot of things that I've seen since I've been in school, and I've learned a lot since being in there, has less to do with brilliance. It has to do with sacrifice, with work. What are you willing to give up? See? What are you willing to give up? One of the things my sponsor, he just pounds on me, and the reason he does about sticking with things is because his first 12 years in sobriety, and this is part of the story and he'll tell it, is that he sacrificed a lot of his future to get what he wanted right then. And this is what he tells me, and I don't think he minds me telling you because it's in his tape and his story and everything else. And so he says, look, don't make the sacrifice. See, don't make the sacrifice. I made it for you. I waited until I was 38 years old before I was going to decide to do something with my life, and don't wait till you're 38 years old. See? And say the same thing to you. You can do anything with your life. See? You're right now, you're at the point in your life you can do anything with it. And you might think that, oh, you just aren't good enough, you don't got what it takes, anything like baloney. See, it's not about whether you have what it takes. Do you have the heart? See? Do you have the heart? If you got this program behind you and you got a little heart, you got a whole lot. A whole lot. And that lot is what you've given to me. I want to thank you because you accepted a guy who's basically been living out in this world. You know, I was just a little boy the whole time trying to live in that big boy's world. And I thank you because I think you just tried to make me a man, and today you let me live in God's world. Thank you.